saw his versatility in the preseason game, really able to play all the guard positions and right tackle if need be. And then, you have a guy like John Franklin Myers who's so good that the Rams already have him as their starter if Aaron Donald doesn't report. And so they didn't even play him in his first game. I mean, he's a rookie. He was a healthy scratch in preseason. So you have all those guys. It really blows my mind, Eric, what they were able to do just all together. And if they're able to get, like you and I both reported, once this thing is done, it being done this offseason, it would be a historic offseason that I don't think we've seen in the NFL in quite some time.
Right. Well, but here's where I have to disagree with you on superstars. And you didn't mention the special teams, and I think their special teams have superstars in key positions. You've got Johnny Hecker and you've got Greg Zuerlein, which I think are superstars, but they don't get the notoriety because they're special teams guys, and they have the number one special teams. And to me, that's going to be the difference if they can make it. I agree with you. I think to the NFC Championship game. Not saying that they're obviously going to make it there, but if they get there, they've got to be the favorite because that special teams unit could be the difference between a Super Bowl berth and going home. And if you have the number one special teams, and that includes Pharaoh Cooper, on kickoffs, and then they've got a couple of other guys that are vying for punt return duties and things like that. And I think Pharaoh Cooper had a terrible playoff game last year, fumbling away a couple of kickoffs and punts, but he's learned from that, and I think it's going to be a lot different for him this year. But my point again is this: they have superstars on that special teams unit, and that's the difference between them and the rest of the teams in the NFC that are contenders for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree with you there. And Pharaoh, that was really unfortunate because I think people were so quick to forget how big Pharaoh was. The Rams were averaging a start position on their offensive drive at around the 30-yard line. I mean, Pharaoh Cooper was averaging 5 yards more than what you would get by just a touchback. So, I mean, that's huge because, the new rules pushed it from the 20 to the 25-yard line. Now you're starting at the 30, and honestly, I think the biggest issue with the Rams offense last year was the Rams offense. And what I mean by that is that they scored too quickly. They put the defense right back on the field, and it wasn't a defense that's built today where you look at a Marcus Peters and a Aqib Talib. Those are guys that are going to be able to, really force turnovers and, create points. This team, they had their fair share of turnovers last year, but they weren't the team that was going to have, an 8 interception guy like I believe Marcus Peters could be this year.
Right.
So, I think that was one of the most, it's one of those things where you try to explain to somebody and they just don't really understand what you're saying. They scored too quickly. It's as simple as that.
And another Achilles heel for their defense is I think they were ranked 25th against the run, which is a big reason why they got Ndamukong Suh in, because not only is he, he's a good, he scares quarterbacks, but he's a good run stopper, and that will free up Aaron Donald and Brockers and whoever else is in there to go after the quarterback, but he's up the middle trying to stop the run. So that was a huge thing for the Rams last year. That was their Achilles heel, and Atlanta was on the field a long time after Brockers got hurt in that football game, and they were able to run the ball and eat up some of the clock, and that's what really hurt the Rams. And so, yeah, I completely agree. They scored really fast, and then the defense was back on the field quickly, and then when you keep them on the field because they can't stop the run, then that kind of puts them, on their heels.
Yeah, and what is even crazier is the fact that the defense had such a hard time stopping the run, and the defense looked lost at times, and yet the offense was so good, they were able to hang in there in games like Philadelphia. And then, unfortunately with the Atlanta game, you could only do so much. Like, I thought, people are really hard on a young quarterback in Jared Goff that really, I looked at it, stood toe-to-toe with an MVP who had just played his last year in the postseason in the Super Bowl. And I thought he outplayed him. for the most part. So,
Yeah, they all played well. It's just, their weaknesses were exposed based on last year's team.
Yeah.
So now I don't know that there's a weakness there. If they, with Sue in the middle, and as I said, those linebackers are really no names to everybody, but I think they're going to make a name for themselves. They're fast off the snap, and they're just quick. They're all over the place. I was pretty much amazed to see what that whole defense did on Thursday, again without Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
So that's what's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny because I was a huge fan of the trade they made for Mark Barron, former 7th overall pick in 2015, and he just didn't work out in Lovie Smith's system as a safety. Tampa 2,
Mm-hmm.
you would think he'd fit right in. He apparently just wasn't a safety because he went to the Rams. They traded him to be a safety, and traded for him. They traded a couple 6th rounders, I believe, and a 4th rounder. And, that was just a steal of a trade. And then, Corey Littleton is a guy that I picked to make the roster when they signed him as a UDFA. Fun fact with him is that, he actually came from Washington, and he was he was an edge rusher. He wasn't an inside backer. So his skill set and his overall understanding and feel for the game has really transformed in that regard. But, being an edge rusher and everything, the Rams liked him. They needed a guy, behind Quinn. They thought maybe they could develop him. Well, the funny thing is with him and the Pac-12 has this kind of weird rule with the NFL where, they can't report to camp until they graduate. He had not graduated from college yet. So he had to stay, and he came in late, during OTAs or after OTAs, and everyone was saying he's going to get cut. And I kept saying, I'm like, this guy has a lot of talent. I think he makes the roster. And then sure enough, he makes the roster. He was the Rams MVP in that disastrous 2016 season. And then he turns into basically a special teams ace. Kind of reminded me of the way Kayvon Webster was used with the Broncos, where he just kind of stepped up and became that captain. And now here he is. He's calling all the shots. I think he's going to be quarterbacking this defense, and he's got all the athleticism. Reminds me a lot of a Shaquille Barrett, somebody that Wade coached, and obviously they developed and they liked him very much. So I'm very intrigued by these linebackers, and furthermore, Micah Kaiser, Tigray Scales, Traven Howard, the rookies I really like. I want to get your take because unfortunately I'm not out at camp, and I know they just finished. I had a couple writers out there to report a little bit, but is there anyone that the mainstream is not really talking about that really jumped out at you at camp?
Well, I was just there on Thursday, but they all, literally they all the defense, they all stood out because I think Wade Phillips, what they did was they simulated a game situation on Thursday where they had about 100 plays, obviously, and they even simulated a halftime. So what they did was at the end of 2 quarters, they blew a horn, and all of a sudden the team is running off the field into the locker room, and everybody's wondering, well, where are they going? And what Coach McVay explained to us after is that he wanted to simulate a complete game situation, and so they were in there for about 15 minutes and came right back. So they did a halftime. But everybody on that defense, as I said, everybody, there really wasn't anybody you could single out. They were so quick, every one of them. They were so quick, so fast. Even Jared Goff got knocked down one time, and Coach McVay was scared there for a second, I guess. But they're really, on that particular day, they all stood out because it was, I can't even explain how impressive it was. It was, every player was completely impressive on the defensive side of the ball. And there's a lot of good things to look at for that team. All those guys are good.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. It's one of those things, Eric, where I know a lot of people don't like preseason, But I mean, this is my bread and butter. I'm a big fan of like those draft gems, those under the radar guys. I really like the underdog, and that's probably gotten me into more trouble than good things out of it. But no, I really enjoy watching preseason. I really dissected the last game tape against the Ravens. Really broke that all down and watched everything. And it'll be fun because John Franklin Myers is actually going to be making his debut this Saturday against the Raiders. And like I said earlier, I cannot believe what this kid has shown to this coaching staff to keep him out of his rookie debut as basically a starter that had to sit. That was mind blowing to me. I'm really looking forward to seeing him go, and I've honestly been a really big fan of Sebastian Joseph Day, who was a 6th round pick. They had a bunch of 6th round picks, and he was a 6th round pick out of Rutgers. And the reason I say that is because the guy they drafted in the 6th round last year, Tanzel Smart, out of Tulane, I don't think they got much production out of him. And I don't think he's really. I don't think he's going to make the roster. And I think they have a legitimate nose tackle as a backup behind, Ndamukong Suh and Sebastian Joseph Day. I thought he played very well against the Ravens, put a ton of pressure, in the backfield. He had a couple quarterback hits, so I was really impressed with him. And I think that's really the key. Is a lot of people want to say that this is a top-heavy roster. But I think they have a lot of depth where they will be good long term, and I think that's even if what I believe will happen is they end up seeing LaMarcus Joyner head into free agency after this season.
Right, and that's a reason why they traded down. They traded, obviously they got Cooks from New England, but Les Snead has been trading down to get extra picks, and what they're looking for is obviously depth. And that's what they got out of it. And, they have to, they're doing something similar I think the Chargers are doing something similar that the Rams are doing. They have to fill a stadium in 2 years. They have to sell tickets for that. So the Rams and the Chargers are all in when it comes to winning, and they want to win immediately because, again, they have to fill that stadium. So Les Snead has been very methodical about getting free agents that they can plug in immediately to do something on the field immediately and making trades and then stockpiling these draft picks for all that depth. And it's beginning to work very well for him, and I think we'll all see that this season.
I definitely agree, and I think that's one of the key ingredients of this league is if you have, a ton of depth, that next man up, idea is the culture in the NFL. I had Emery Hunt from Football Game Plan on here, and he likes to say, it's not backup, it's starter and waiting. These are all guys that can play in this league, and when you have a lot of guys that are better at playing in this league than others, you have good depth, you have a lot of starters in waiting, and I think that kind of brings me to my next point. I don't know about the quarterback position, Eric, because, Sean Mannion, I think you have to give him somewhat the benefit of the doubt because of how poor the offensive line was around him. After watching that game 3 times over, I just don't know how some of those guys are on the roster. But, I think it's also fair to be like, Sean Mannion was drafted the year before Jared Goff in the 3rd round, same draft as Todd Gurley, and what have we seen out of him to kind of justify him being by far, the backup quarterback?
Well, you nailed it on the head. I mean, when he played in a regular season game last year, he was playing with 2nd-string guys and some 3rd-string guys. So what I was noticing on Thursday is that Jared Goff is Jared Goff. Jared Goff throws a dart. And the way that defense was playing on Thursday, he had to put the ball right in their hands, right in the receiver's hands, if he was throwing it. And that's what he was doing. And then when Sean Mannion was up, he throws a nice ball as well. You got to remember Sean Mannion. I think he still might.